Welcome to Get to Know the Real Estate Ecosystem, the podcast where we share unfiltered stories from the people shaping the real estate market. Today, we have a guest speaker who truly embodies the journey from boots on the ground agent to seasoned mentor and guide. He has been a full time professional since 1999, boasting an impressive 99.8% closing rate. Our guest today is Bill Farragher. Isn't just a veteran of the industry, he is a true leader. Alongside his wife, he built and ran his own brokerage for years and now continue to make an impact in the real estate market through his extensive work in HOA property management and mentorship. Bill is known for his strong negotiation skills, his commitment to giving straight answers even when they are hard to hear, and his dedication to helping others grow. His story is not just about real estate, it's about reinvention, growth, and giving back to the community. More recently, Bill has embraced a mission to share his 20 plus years of experience with the next generation of real estate professionals. He is passionate advocate for new agents, guiding them through the financial changes of starting a career and helping them build a long-term plan for success. Today, we will dive into his incredible journey and explore why he is dedicated to paying it forward. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Bill Farragher. Bill, thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Anisha, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. I look forward to it.
Okay, Bill. So, let's start with your story. How did your journey in real estate begin back in 1999?
I was a middle manager for a children's clothing apparel warehouse, and I just got to the point where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired and decided that I needed to make a change. I didn't know what it was going to be, and a couple months later, I decided, well, I'm going to go ahead and go to real estate school and get my real estate license. And somewhere in the middle of the class, I realized that there was no way I was going to be able to do real estate and keep my full-time job because it was 6 to 7 days a week and didn't know when my time off was going to be. So I thought, how am I going to schedule time with clients? So I decided to quit my job. And, the family thought I was nuts. And that's kind of where it started.
Got it. Got it. Well, that sets the tone for the whole journey. So, what was the biggest lesson you learned as a brand new agent back then?
Practice, practice, practice. You have to practice the contracts. You have to practice the listing paperwork. If you're not going to become a student of the industry, I don't know how you can expect to succeed in it. And that's with not just real estate, but with any industry. That's kind of the number one thing is practice, practice, practice. Then you have to learn the rules of the game. Every industry has certain rules and regulations. And so you need to know what those rules and regulations are and get to know them and then play better than anybody else. And then take the advice from people who have been successful in the industry. There's a lot of people who get their advice from every Tom, Dick, and Harry who doesn't really know what the heck they're doing. But if you're going to walk through a minefield, it's best to follow somebody that's already been through the minefield. And so that's for the beginning. That's kind of my entry to agents that are just getting started.
It is clear that your approach is both disciplined and strategic. And now, speaking of strategy, you have achieved a 99.8% closing rate post attorney review, which is remarkable. What's the secret behind that consistency?
Attention to details is critical. You have to have a team that you put together that are all working cohesively. So your team has to be your attorney, your inspector, your mortgage rep, the title company, even the people on the other side of the transaction. You have to work together with them. There have been many times that I had to help the other agent help their client so that we could all get to the closing table. So it's not a matter of it's my job, your job, it's our job. And I always taught my agents that you're the director. It's your movie. It's your play. You're in charge. You can't look at, that's not my job. No, if it needs to be done, you sometimes have to do it, even though it's not necessarily, quote unquote, your job.
Since we are talking about real estate, I'm curious, what type of real estate did you focus on? Were you primarily involved in residential or commercial, or was it a mix of both?
I focused almost exclusively on residential. I
Okay,
wouldn't even I did what would be classified as a couple of commercial transactions, but to me, they really weren't commercial. Mixed use where you had a office or a retail on the first floor with a couple of rental units above it. I don't look at that as a commercial transaction. It's just a little bit higher elaboration of a residential transaction. So I stayed away from commercial because that's a whole nother animal, a whole nother industry. If you're going to go into that arena, you need to get your CCM and you need to follow people who are doing that. I was doing residential. I liked residential, like working with people. And that's kind of where I focused my attention.
got it. So, I have spoken to many guest speakers, and they often say that residential real estate tends to be more of an emotional transactions, while commercial deals are more of a number based driven and that kind of, you know, transaction based. With that in mind, how did you manage the emotional ups and downs that came with every deal that you handled?
That's a great question, Anisha, because in residential real estate, it is very emotional. You're dealing with, especially if it's first time home buyers, and then you take into consideration first time home buyers whose never had anybody in their family own a home and they're the first ones. So there's a lot of nerves and a lot of anxiety and whatnot. So I learned about personalities, which definitely helped because I could understand whether my clients were straight to the point or were they more sensitive? Did they need more hand holding? Were they more outgoing and fun loving? And I had to work with them to get them to focus on the details of the transaction. Or then you have those that are very detail oriented and they ask a million questions and you've got to give them answers and they've got to be good answers. And so that was part of what helped me keep the transactions together is being able to understand the personalities and work with them and having that knowledge. And so I would encourage that people kind of get that kind of knowledge as well. It helps you with everything in life. Um, and it was a blessing that we learned about that before I got into real estate. So it turned out to be a huge benefit in my career.
That's amazing, Bill. Out of curiosity, have you ever experienced a situation where a client ghosts a real estate agent? And what advice would you give to agents who find themselves in such kind of a fix or in that kind of a situation?
Well, for a new agent, that was one of the things I always tell people. In my first 30 days in business, I wrote up 60 contracts. Now, if you ask, that sounds like wow, that's great. But the question they always forget to ask is, well, how many clients were you working with? And that answer was none, zero, nada, and it blows their mind. And I said, well, it was practice. So in the following month, that I wound up with a buyer client, and they found a property loved. I didn't have to pause and think, well, now what do I do? No, I could confidently go back to the office. Back in the day, that's we used to go to the office and write up the contract. Those are the good old days, and we don't really have to do that anymore. But because everything is digital. But the bottom line is that I was prepared and confident in writing up without having to skip a beat, and I didn't have to do the humana and I didn't have to worry about, getting in touch with my broker or somebody else to help me do that. I was able to do and that's what you should do. You should strive for as an agent is to be able to stand on your own 2 feet because you're in your own business. Yes, you have to hang your license in office. And then with that first client, when we closed and I did my post-closing survey, I reminded them that this was my first closing and I asked for their feedback on the service after they completed the survey. And, they were blown away and surprised when I told them that they were my first client. They had no idea. And they said that they thought that I had been in business for years. So again, the practice, it gives you the confidence. You know what it is. When I started with real estate, I think the contract was 7 pages. Now it's 14 pages plus gazillion addendums, and there's no shortage of experience when you practice. It gives you confidence. It helps you with everything within the transactions. It's just and a lot of that gets incorporated into the buyer's presentation, before you even go out and show them a home and stuff like that. So the number one, practice, practice, practice.
Got it. Thank you so much for clarifying that. That makes a lot of sense. Now, referrals really seem to be the backbone of your business. I am curious to know this, that how did you manage to build such strong client loyalty over the years?
Well, again, it comes down to the attention to detail, treating clients with respect, following up after the transaction and closing. Over the years, we've tried different marketing strategies. One of my favorites was the American Lifestyle magazine. I was on the cover. It would sit on their living room, coffee table, or in their bathroom, wherever, but they would see my picture every month and it would be there. And the company's still around that did that. Now they're digital. And look, I tried a lot of other things that didn't work. And as real estate agents, I used to caution my agents all the time when they were new. I said, look, you're going to get hit with every type of advertising that's out there, and you've got to be very selective with what you do. And look, I'm guilty as charged. I've blown money on advertising that didn't, I should have never touched. But that was staying in touch with the clients today, with social media. And I'm not a big social media fan. My wife Karen is much more adept at that than I am. I tell people, look, don't get buried in social media. You have to be on there. You have to, get some lessons on how to use it if you don't have somebody that can help you. That's again, it's customers, clients, it's relationships and following up and having them get information from you on a regular basis, because it's not their job to remember that you're a real estate agent. It's your job to remind them that you're a real estate agent.
I think, Bill, that's a wonderful advice that, us being a younger generation can learn from. You have spoken about your wife, Karen. So now we don't see husband and wife duos as business partners. You have shared that you have worked closely with your wife, Karen, and we want to know, what was it like building a business and career as a team? And how did you manage to balance both your personal as well as your professional side in that partnership?
That's a great question. I think probably like most couples, we started out and she had her business, I had my business, but there was a challenge there because we only had one car because we had downsized. We were both working for the same company and we worked across the street from where we lived. So we really didn't need two cars. So we had one car. When I had convinced her to quit her job finally and join me in real estate. And so when we first got started, it was a little bit tough because we had to coordinate our schedules when it was time to show. And when do most people show? It's Saturdays and Sundays. And so we would have to kind of decide, okay, well, you can take Saturdays and I can take Sundays. Well, that really didn't work. In theory, it sounds like, yeah, that'll work. But, she has a hot client that is only available Saturday. And what am I supposed to do? Not let her go show? And so we decided, okay, we're going to work together. We'll use the same schedule. We will be a team. And so that's what we did. She handled for both of us, like all of the paperwork on the back end. Even though I would do the contracts with the clients because she was not as comfortable with that as I was. So it was a learning lesson, but I wouldn't change anything because we got to be known as the dream team and we worked so well together because of our personalities. I'm a DI and she's an SC, and if you've followed a disc model you'll understand that. But that's what it worked, and we made it work because syncing wasn't an option. We had to make it work. And so it was some tweaking, but we finally got to it. And then Dotloop came along, which was an online transaction platform. And I fell in love with that. And then I took the pressure off of her of keeping track of any of the paperwork and whatnot. And she was able to then focus more on what she does, which is nurturing the clients. And she's the one that kind of kept the clients in there because she would be on the social media and stuff like that. So it really kind of helped. Like I said, every team has to figure out how they're going to work and what works for them. And what we did worked for us for the past 26 years. We're at the point where we're scaling down and going into what I call semi-retirement from real estate. And I guess, and that's how it worked. And it all worked out, beautifully for us. I mean, people, would tell us all the time that, they don't know how we did it, but we did.
That's really wonderful, Bill. And I love how you and Karen found your own rhythm instead of following a set formula. It's very inspiring to see how you both played to your strengths. You on the business and negotiation side, and her being on the client experience side. It really shows how teamwork and trust can make a business thrive for, like so many years. Now, that brings me to something I'm more curious about. You opened your office in 2005 and later sold it in 2012. What went into that decision? What happened?
Well, like marriages sometimes don't last. We had a business partner that we took on in 2008, and there were some things that in the beginning, everything was great. And, like a marriage, stuff happens and it just didn't work out. And we wound up selling the business and moving on. It's kind of water under the bridge, but that's what happened. It was not something that we planned on. There was some disagreements that we couldn't resolve. So we wound up selling the business, and he went his way and we went our way. And as they say, the rest is history.
Makes sense, Bill. So it sounds like selling the office was a turning point, and I appreciate your honesty about how things unfolded. Now, looking back now, what did running your own office teach you about leadership and growth?
That's amazing question. When first opened the office, I did not realize the amount of time it would take working with the agents. We grew our office to, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was like 82 agents in the first 2 years. We were from Hudson County and moved to open our office in Middlesex County, where nobody knew Bill and Karen. And Bill and Karen didn't know any of the realtors in that area. We just pounded the pavement, so to say, of recruiting. And it was a lot of work, and I wouldn't do that again. No, but we had a lot of fun. We did. We had a lot of fun. We were located in the Jewelry Exchange building in the Woodbridge Mall. That building was first floor jewelry stores, and second through 9 was all office space that has since been converted to still jewelry on the first floor, residential for the rest of the building. So they redid the buildings, but it was a great location. The only downfall in that location was that there was no outside signage. And so we had to get a little creative in advertisement, and we got on a board, the local realtor board, and we're involved with the MLS, and so that people would get to know us and other realtors would get to know us, and it helped in terms of recruiting and growing our business. That's how we started. Just good old hard work.
So, after selling your office, you transitioned into managing the Mattawan office. How did that experience differ from running your own brokerage?
When we sold the office, we didn't have any plans of going back into managing. We were just going to be real estate agents and, focus on just our own book of business and stuff like that. But, we were part of an exit realty system, and, everybody within the state kind of knows what everybody else is doing within the system. And we got a call from a broker who owned 2 offices, one in Mercer County and one in Monmouth County at the time. As they say, opportunities come when you least expect them. And so I live by the philosophy, happy wife, happy life. Karen likes the managing side of the business. And so when we were offered an opportunity, she wanted to go that way. And like they say, is happy wife, happy life. And we wound up doing, we came to an agreement, negotiated, blah, 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 yada, yada. The nice thing about managing the office was that we didn't have to worry about the finances of it. When
Okay.
we had our own office, you had to worry about the rent, and you had to worry about all of the bills that, and what are the closings, and do we have enough closings in the drawer that's gonna, pay the bills, and still have a couple bucks left over. We didn't have to worry about any of that. No rent, no mortgage payment, none of that. And so if the copier broke, it wasn't on us, it was on, the owners. That would be kind of the biggest advantage, was that we didn't have to worry about the finances. We could just focus on running and building the office. And we didn't build it crazy like we did when we built ours. I told the owner, look, I'm not going to put a whole bunch of people in. So we looked for agents that were a little bit more seasoned, had a little bit more knowledge, and was able to produce without a lot of hand holding, because the first time around, it was a lot of time invested in a lot of different agents. Some of it paid off, some of it didn't. There was a lot of new agents that we had. I didn't want to have to go through all of that all over again. So we kind of worked out that way. One of the main things was that we didn't have to worry about the money end of it. And then we could focus on our business and on the agents, and, helping the agents figure out what do they need to make, and have them set goals. And I used to teach agents never to look at any single commission in terms of how much are you going to make from that, because it's a year over year process. And you never know, the person that you help with a lower end home purchase, their parents or their aunts or uncles or somebody they know might be looking to buy a bigger house or sell a bigger house. And so you have to treat everybody like a person, not just look at them as a dollar amount. And so when you do that, you're also showing people that you care. That goes into part of the previous, how do you get the 99.8% closing rate, is by treating people right, and doing right by people, and not looking at them as a paycheck. It's a whole another level. And if you're going to do this, that not every client is going to get to the closing table. You're going to work with clients, and some of them are going to disappear. They change their mind, whatever. You're going to have listings that, the seller is going to get crazy and not want to do a price adjustment when they need to do a price adjustment, or they're not going to clean the house, or they're not going to make it available, and that listing's going to expire. That's just part of the business, and you have to accept that. So, focus on the client, do what's right, and everything works out, and then you just repeat, rinse and repeat. That's as they say. And so it averages out at the end of the year. Goals, you have to know what your expenses are, personal
Yeah.
and business, and you have to break it down. How many transactions do you need? You need to know your average numbers. And, we're not going to talk commissions. We're not going to talk percentages. I don't want to get in trouble with NAR or NAJAR or anything like that. But you just kind of not got to know your numbers. And that's with any business. As a real estate agent, you're in your own business. You just have to hang your license with a brokerage. So I think that kind of answers that in terms of, the difference between owning our own and this. It was, we got to focus more on the people and the agents, and not have to worry about the money end of it.
So it's clear that your approach is all about building long-term relationships, understanding clients' needs, and teaching agents the value of patience and consistency. It's great mindset for both new as well as experienced agents to adapt. So, Bill, you have always been known for giving straight answers even if people don't want to hear it. Why has that honesty been such a core value for you?
Nisha, that's a great question. I always go back to my core values, the way I live my life. And, people sometimes question, and it's God, country, and family. And to be honest with myself, honest with my clients, let me share a story, and it's kind of funny, but it really illustrates honesty in this business. It
Sure.
is one of my favorite stories of, me just being crazy and having to admit, that I screwed up somewhere along the line here. I was at a CO inspection for a rental property for clients who had moved out of state to Tennessee, and we were renting their house out. Karen was in the driveway in the car reading a book while I was inside with the inspector. Now, the inspector went outside to check the yard and the patio, make sure the ground fault outlets were. There was one of those round poles that, people put in the sliding door so that people can't just. So I'm standing in the dining room. Now the house is vacant. I'm standing in the dining room with this pole in my hand, and I'm a guy, and so it's like a bat, and I'm making believe I'm a bat, and then boom, I go back and smash a couple of light bulbs out of the chandelier. The inspector comes back inside, surprised as heck. He says, "What the heck happened here?" So I kind of told him the story. He said, "Well, look, I got to fail you now because you're not." So he failed me, and he went about his way. And I told him, "Look, I'll get it fixed." He said, "Look, you get it fixed this afternoon. You call me. I'll swing back and sign off on it." So great. So he leaves. I call Karen into the house, and she says, "So how we
Yeah.
make out?" I says, "We failed. I didn't let her see the dining room floor yet." She says, "What'd you fail for?" I said, "Come here, let me show you." They showed a broken glass on the dining room floor. She says, "What the heck happened?" So I tell her the story, and she says, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, first I got to call the client." I says, "I got to tell them what happened, and I got to let them know that there's good news, bad news." And she says, "Well, what's the good news?" I says, "Well, the good news is they're going to get maybe some new chandelier if I can't get this fixed right. The bad news is that we failed the inspection, but I'll take care of it." So I called the client, and the first thing that the client said to me was, "Where was Karen?" And of course, I told her, and she says, "That explains it. That explains it." So that was that to me. That was a Now look, we wound up having to clear our calendar. We had another appointment we were supposed to go to. Had to cancel that appointment. We had to go run down to the Home Depot, get light bulbs, get globes. There was no matching globes. I had to buy five globes. Fix it, get back to the inspector. He came back, and we passed. It was I could have easily had just done that, changed the thing, but what if the client wound up coming back home to the house before the new tenant moved in, or even after the tenant moved in, they did a inspection and they saw they changed and that's not a big deal. But if the globes were changed and they asked the tenant, "Did you guys change the globes on the chandelier?" "No, we didn't do that. It was like that when we moved in." You can't take a shortcut and not own up to when you do something, because it's gonna come back to bite you. That client still to this day talks about that story, and I talk about this. I got a lot of mileage out of that story. And then I have one more example. You got time for one more example?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah, I had another client who was under contract, and while we were in the turn of review, another property. They weren't under. We were in the turn of review. Another property became available. I could have ignored the opportunity because the commission would have been smaller. But I called my clients, explained that, "Hey, look, there's no property," gave them the choice. They choose the other property. And since then, I think I've done 6 or 7 transactions with them and their family. As a matter of fact, I got a text from her brother tonight that he wants to sell his house in South Amboy. They've been clients of ours, them and their whole family, for, oh God, it's probably over 12, 13 years, and I don't know how many transactions. The takeaway is tell the truth. You don't have to remember what you said because the truth doesn't change. And sometimes it's hard for clients to hear. And that goes into your question about sometimes I have to tell people, some hard news and they don't want to hear it, but I deliver it as gently as I possibly can. But if they respect the honesty, then you've built a strong relationship. And if not, then they're not the client for you. And that's just my philosophy. And, sometimes it's just not a good fit. But that's
That's nice, Bill. And it's incredible how you consistently put your client's need above the commissions, and even when it meant potentially earning less in the short term. That kind of approach clearly builds trust and long term loyalty, that is for sure. And it's a lesson all agents can learn from. So now you have trained and mentored countless agents. And what qualities do you see in someone that tells you that they will succeed in real estate?
Yeah. First of all, they have to be there has to be a willingness to learn. That's got to be the first thing. they're not willing to learn, then they're gonna have a hard time making it. People have to realize that no matter how smart they are or what they've done before, they don't know real estate yet. And watching HGTV doesn't teach you real estate either. Okay, I joke with my buyers when I'm doing the first consultation, and I'll say, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna look at a few homes that match what you want. We'll show you three, and then you'll pick one, just like on HGT. And they look at me like, really? I said, no, no, I'm just kidding. Occasionally that'll happen, but I like to have a little bit of fun with my clients. I like to, especially on the first consultation, I want to kind of ease the tension and joke with them a little bit. But
Sure.
that's but you have to set up some realistic expectations and go over that. So willingness to learn for an agent is key. Also, another one. They have to have an ability to fail. There's a lot of people who don't make it in this business because they're afraid to fail. It could be their background, it could have been the way they were raised, it could have been, a million different things, but you have to develop a thick skin and you have to be willing to hear the word no. Because in real estate, this is not like other sales positions where if you're in a furniture store or a car dealership or anything where the customer comes in to see you, in real estate, you have to go out and get the customer. You have to go out and get the client. And so you have to be willing to, go knock on some doors, make some phone calls, chase down some expired listings, chase down some for sale by owners. And that's not easy for some people. Coming back to like the training, part of the training we used to do is we'd have phone calls in sessions. I'd pick up the phone and say, give me a number. Give me a number. I pick any number. And I'd get on the phone, show them, look, people aren't going to bite your head off. Same thing with door knocking, go out and knock on doors and show them that, hey, look, we had our scripts. We'd have practice our scripts and stuff like that. You can't just go up and, kind of make it up on the fly. You've got to know what you're going to say. You've got to kind of have some questions, and then, you got to bounce off of what their answers are. But, when you show agents that, look, people aren't, majority of the people are not mean. They're not out to get you. Did I get a couple doors slammed in my face? Yeah, one or two here or there. It's, but that comes with the territory. Did I get people hang up on me? Sure, I did, but you dial the next number. It's like dialing for dollars. But if you can't do that, if you can't handle a rejection and keep going, you're going to fail. You have to be able to do that. So you have to have persistency. You gotta plan for success. It doesn't just happen. Every day you have to show up with the mentality that I'm broke. I got to go to work and do what it is. I'm going to scan into social media. That doesn't mean surfing social media all day. That's not working. Working is talking to people. That's working. So,
Sure.
right? When you're an employee, you show up at a job, they tell you what to do and you do it. But as a real estate agent, you're in your own business. You incorporated. You have to, your license hangs with a brokerage, and hopefully that brokerage offers some good training. But if they don't, you've got to go and find it yourself. That's the mindset that leads to real success.
Right. And that makes us so much sense. And I love how you framed it as you incorporated. That mindset really changes everything about how you show up. So for those new agents who are just starting out is there anything additional you would want to add? What's the first thing they should really prioritize?
Well, they should have a business plan. If you go into any other business, you want to go to a bank and get a loan for a business, they're going to ask you, what's your business plan? Show me what you're going to do. And they're not going to just, because I want to open up this business, I want to be successful. That's not going to work for a bank. So if you're in your own business, you need to have a business plan. That's number one. There's some great books out there that they can start with. And honestly, even while they're in school, that's the perfect time to start learning, is because what you learn in real estate school doesn't teach you how to do real estate. So you may as well, while you're in school and you're not yet licensed, get some information on what you need to do when you get licensed. If they already know which office they're going to join, I tell them reach out to the broker and ask to sit in on some of the training sessions that they have. Some offices train weekly, others biweekly or monthly. Many of them are doing it virtually now. So the more you can learn before you actually start doing, the better off you'll be. If this is going to be your career, you have to invest the time and effort into mastering it. Think about it. You wouldn't go to a brain surgeon who just graduated, never performed surgery, and says, well, I've got my license. I'll figure it out when I need to. You'd run the other way, right? Well, that's what happens with new agents who lack confidence. And it goes back to my first thing when I talked about the 60 contracts. You have to practice, practice, practice. You need to come across like you know what you're doing. People say fake it till you make it. I say don't fake it. Study it, learn it so that you'll never have to fake it.
Now, something that often surprises new agent is the financial side of real estate, Bill. So, how do you help agents calculate the real cost of starting and sustaining their career?
Well, in real estate, there are expenses that are fixed expenses. You have your board, your MLS, your super key, your lockbox key. If you're buying a couple of combo lockboxes for yourself, I always wanted to have my own stuff. I didn't want to rely on getting it from the office when we were just agents in an office. So I got my own lockboxes. I got my own combination lockboxes. I got my own signs. I was in business. I treated it like a business. And so, that was just me. A lot of people don't do that. But I always encourage agents, look, if it's your stuff, first of all, you're going to take care of it. Second of all, you're not going to have to worry about, coming to the office to get it or if anybody's there to get it for you or, because some of the offices have their lock boxes locked up because the electronic lock boxes are $100 each and they want to know who's got them and where they are at, stuff like that. So, you have to but you need to know what your fixed expenses are. Then your advertising. If you're relying on the office to advertise for you, again, you're not in your own business then. So when we first got started, we put a small ad in. We had a community paper that got delivered for free every home in the town. And all we did is put a business card size ad in there every week. I think it cost me $50 a week at the time. So it was like $200 a year, $200 a month, $2,400 a year. A small price to pay, and it was consistent. I didn't have to think about, am I going to put it in this month? Am I going to this week, that week? No, it was there every week. We had the information, and people got to recognize us. And it got to the point when we moved our office to Woodbridge, I was getting on an elevator and a guy getting on with me said, hey, I know you. You're a realtor in Bayonne. I said, well, yeah, I was. I said, I moved, I opened my office here. He says, yeah, I see your paper. I see your ad in the paper every week. Now, this was probably 2.5 to 3 years in to being in Woodbridge. And I hadn't advertised in the Bayonne Community News since we opened our office. So even though this was 2.5 to 3 years later, I don't remember exact time, he still thought he saw our ad in the paper every week because it was ingrained in him. So yeah, that's, but again, you have to know what you're spending. Are you getting a payback on it? I spent money on advertisement, like I said earlier, that it was a total waste of my money. It sounded good. I thought it was going to be good. And look, you're going to make mistakes like that, but you have to know your expenses. You got to know what you need to make, and you've got to break it down to how many transactions you need to do so that you can pay your bills, pay your taxes, put some money aside for a rainy day, and build on that.
Got it. Yeah.
I think if I, again, let me add to that. If you're going to be in your own business, you have to generate income, and most transactions are 60 to 90 days out. Sometimes you can get a closing as quick as 45 days, but you need to make money right away. Go out and get a listing. Listings are, especially right now, the market's, is so good for listing agents that, go get for sale by owners, go chase expires. There's not that many expireds because most of the listings are selling, but, go chase for sale by owners because 87% of them are going to list with a realtor. Why not let it be you? And if you're going to work with a buyer, I mean, today with the NAR settlement, I've always used buyer agency agreement. I liked having the same commitment from a client that from a buyer client that I had from a seller, and it kind of let me know where they were at. So, but you got to go out and do that, and you got to know your numbers. You're in a business. If you don't break it down, then you don't
Yeah.
know what you need to do to be successful. And successful is different for every agent.
I love how you keep emphasizing treating it like your own business because that mindset really changes how seriously someone approaches the profession. So, building up on that, when you are mentoring new agents, how do you help them stay consistent with prospecting and building habits, especially when results don't show up right away?
Well, like I said, we used door knocking as a group when we were training agents. Also made phone calls. We do cold calling and prospecting calls. A lot of people come into the business with fears, and the only way to overcome fear is through action. They weren't go out and do it on their own. So they needed that extra push and support. Once they got exposed to it and realized, hey, you can actually have fun doing this, their whole mindset shifted. Most of the time, people aren't slamming the door in your face. Most of the time, people aren't cursing you out. They started to see it's really about striking up a conversation. Sometimes the person at the door wasn't ready to sell. Guess what? They'd mentioned that someone down the block was thinking about it because they had just talked to them recently, and suddenly you've got another potential lead. And then you can say, well, John down the block mentioned you might be thinking about selling, and that opens the door for that conversation. You have to build a little bit of a relationship first. You can't close a sale on a doorstep. The goal is to get in the appointment, to get into the house and sit down with them, but not right at that time, because you got to keep knocking on more doors. If you're going to do it from, say 7 to 9 and 5 after 7, they're inviting you in for a cup of coffee or something. Yeah, that's great, but it's not the time. Schedule that appointment and go knock at the next door. When you go in and you're sitting down at somebody's kitchen table and you're having a cup of coffee, cup of tea, whatever, stay away from the booze. If they offer it, you
Sure.
can, politely reject it and ask for a glass of water. That's something I occasionally remind agents, because some trying to be overly personal, just accept a glass of water. It's always better to drink something, but but always stay away from the booze. As a gesture of respect, you take the water and skip the booze, skip the alcohol. And when you show agents how it's done, by doing it, it builds confidence in them. Then you hand it over to, after a house or two, they're the ones walking up to the door while you're standing back on a sidewalk as support. They'll usually only need that experience once or twice before they're off and running on their own. Same thing with making phone calls. You practice with them. Everyone has different scripts, but they all boil down to the same core goal: getting permission to set an appointment and get in the door. Because if you can't get in the door, you can't sell the house. That's the bottom line.
So you have been described as more of a coach than a manager. Do you see yourself that way too?
I would say so. And, I want to help, but, it's like if you follow sports, and I'm not a big sports person. I don't follow a lot of sports. I played a little bit here and there when I was younger. But my wife doesn't lose me on a Sunday afternoon to football or baseball. But, in sports, whether it's, gymnastics, the Olympics, or anything else, coaches want you to succeed. They can't succeed for you, but they can push you to succeed. They can get you to take the next step to reach that next level. So that's why that's what I try and do as a coach, get the agents to grow. If they had 6 closings this year, let's get them to 8 or 9 next year and show them how they can do that. And they keep building from there. It's about the small steps, the consistency. I mentioned it, you have to work every day. It doesn't have to be 7 days a week, but you need to show up. You need to be willing to work, at least 5 days a week. When I first started, I'll admit I was a little crazy. The first year, though, I took it a bit easy because I had been working since I was 8 and I just wanted to take some time off. I even tried to convince Karen to go on a cross-country road trip for 2 or 3 months, but she just wasn't ready for that. So for the first year, we kind of took it easy, but I still practiced. Like I said, the first 30 days, I wrote up 60 contracts. One in the morning, one in the afternoon, every day for 30 days. But I didn't consider that work. That was practice. And there's a difference. Tiger Woods is probably one of the greatest golfers in the world, And yet, from what I understand, he still hits like 1,000 golf balls a day. He doesn't need to practice, but he stays great because he continues to practice. So that's how I see the difference between a coach and a manager. Manager might do some training, but they often stop there. As a coach, I'm focused on helping people grow, not just maintaining. And here's a key as a coach, or as what I consider to be I don't take credit for their success, and I don't take blame for their failure. The best part though is when you see an agent get it. When they go out and make their first 100,000 and then keep growing, that's rewarding. And like I said, I don't take credit for that because they came in with the right attitude, willing to learn, willing to do, and determined to succeed. All I did was facilitate that and salted the oats, made them thirsty, and helped them move to the next step. I encouraged and coached them, but they did the work. They earned that success. And yes, unfortunately, not everyone makes it. There are more who don't succeed than those who do. It's a tough industry, tougher than most people realize.
Sure, that's exactly what great coaching is about. So, you have also been deeply involved with Exit Realty. How did that experience shape your approach to training?
Exit is, again, it's a national franchise. And what really makes them stand out is their residual income system. But before making the move to Exit, we were with Century 21 and had been approached by pretty much every other company out there, Remax, Colwell, and a few other big name franchises. And my response to all of them was, look, it's all the same. You don't have anything different. So I'm not going to make a move. Then Exit came along and they had a sponsoring program that allowed agents to generate residual income, passive income. And if you've ever read Cash Flow Quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki, he talks about passive income as one of the best forms of income. So when I looked at the Exit formula, it kind of set off light bulbs in my head. I thought, wow, this is something different. They also had a great company culture. And they were still relatively new at that time. When I joined in 2003, Exit was only about 5 or 6 years old as a national franchise, still a baby compared to the other national franchises out there. So people ask, what if it doesn't make it? What if it folds? At the time, Century 21 had been around for 30 years. Over Banker had been around for over 100 years. Remax for 30 or 40. These were all well-established names. And I said, well, if it doesn't make it, I'll just move to another company. But in the meantime, I'm going to join Exit and create residual income. And we did pretty well with our residuals. We sponsored a bunch of agents. And the beauty of it is the residual income doesn't come out of the agent's pocket. It comes from the other side of the equation. So it's truly a win-win situation. And we stayed with Exit ever since. Sure, other companies, come along since then claiming to be bigger or better. But, we're very comfortable with Exit. They have a strong corporate team, a great training platform. And just like all the other big name companies, training, leadership, mentorship are all there. You just have to take advantage of them. And so, a lot of agents in the Exit system didn't take advantage of those opportunities. And I'm sure that's true for other companies as well. So I don't necessarily think success depends on the name of the company you're with. But one of the things we did before we made the move, because I just want to make sure, we actually went to several of our clients and asked them a simple question. If I move from Century 21 to a different company, I didn't even mention any company, and you need real estate help, would you go back to Century 21 or would you work with me no matter which company I was with? And every single one of my past clients said, Bill, you're our agent. We're not going somewhere else. We're going wherever you go. And so that made it a
Awesome.
lot easier for me to make the move, because that was one of my biggest concerns. If I was going to change brokerages, will I lose my client base and have to start all over? And the truth is, the clients are loyal to you, not the company. So, and National Association of Realtors has the stats to back that up as well. And most clients who don't return to their agent say it's because the agent didn't stay in touch. And I'll admit, I've been guilty of that too. There were some clients I just didn't connect with, and I let them fall by the wayside. That's bad for business, and I'll own it. My CRM, client retention program, was sometimes great and sometimes atrocious, but that's life. And I admit that, it's still, but that's why we made the move to Exit and why we stay with them since 2003. And how many years is that now? 23 years? Yeah, 23 years.
So that's really nice, Bill. And it's great how you have how you have built something lasting with Exit. From everything you have shared, it sounds like mentorship and structure can make a big difference early on. So, what would you say is the biggest mistake you see new agents make? something that could easily be avoided with the right guidance?
Anisha, that's a great question. And I think a lot of times new agents are looking for the easy way out, the silver bullet, the magic pill, or the magic wand. They want to be successful, but they don't necessarily want to do the work. And honestly, the only place I've ever seen success come before work is in a dictionary. You have to be willing to do the work. There's no shortcut to success. Sure, you might get lucky here and there, but luck alone does not build a career. If you're serious about making this a long term career, you've got to be willing to put in the effort consistently.
So, if you had to sum it up your entire training philosophy in just one sentence, what would that be, Bill?
Another great question. I'd say that if you're going to walk through a minefield, walk behind someone who's already done it. They know where the mines are and where they aren't. They know what's safe. That's really kind of my philosophy. Find someone who's already doing what you want to do and doing it successfully, and then latch on and learn from them. There's so many experienced agents in this industry who are more than willing to help new agents. You just have to ask. Don't look at the superheroes heroes of the industry and assume they're untouchable or unapproachable. That's the furthest thing from the truth.
That's such a grounded philosophy. I love that analogy of walking behind someone who has already crossed the minefield. It really captures the value of mentorship. Now, shifting gears a little bit, how you have had quite a diverse journey before real estate. You have worked in property management, real estate, and even with NJ Transit. How did those roles prepare you for success in real estate?
Let's go with New Jersey Transit. I really learned the importance of customer service. Before that, I was a bit rough around the edges, very direct with people, almost to the point where you could say I was rude or even obnoxious at times. I had been in the military. In the military, you're very regimented. You know, you're taught to follow orders, not necessarily think for yourself, and that never really sat well with me. So naturally, I managed to tick off just about every supervisor I ever had. When I joined New Jersey Transit, I pretty much carried that same attitude until I met one supervisor who really became a mentor to me. He kind of did what Dr. Phil would later become famous for, the whole, so how's that working for you routine? And that was a turning point because it got me thinking differently and pushed me toward personal development. I'd say that experience learning how to handle people and understand customer service made a huge difference in everything I did afterwards.
Such a powerful transformation. Which market period would you say that has taught you the toughest lesson?
Oh wow. Wow, that's a great question. I would have to say the mortgage collapse of 2007, 2008, and part of 2000 was probably the most challenging period of my career. I'm not going to include COVID in that because while COVID had its own set of challenges, it was relatively shorter term and we were better equipped to adapt thanks to technology. But the mortgage collapse, that was something else. It was devastating for a lot of people. It completely shifted how we had to think in order to survive and continue doing business. For me, that meant focusing on short sales. I became a short sale consultant and helped a lot of sellers who were underwater avoid foreclosure and find some kind of resolution. And that was tough work because on one hand, you're dealing with banks that are purely unemotional. It's all numbers for them. And on the other hand, you're dealing with homeowners who are heartbroken, defeated, and ready to give up. So it was an emotional balancing act every single day. And that period taught me one of the biggest lessons of my career was when the market shifts, you have to adapt. You have to figure out where it's going and get there first if you want to stay ahead of the game.
I can imagine how emotional demanding that time must have been, balancing both the business side and the human side of it. What keeps you motivated to continue doing this instead of slowing down?
Slowing down is not an option for me. I've been telling people for years, retirement is not something I'm looking forward to. I don't want to retire. We're just, evolving what we do. Like I mentioned earlier about personality types, we got certified in personality training a number of years ago before COVID, and we were actively doing that when COVID hit. We decided to, once COVID hit, we decided to launch a website, and it took us a couple years to get it ready, but we finally did. I also got my mortgage license a few years ago. I haven't used it yet because I haven't practiced. and I won't work with a client until I've learned the craft properly. So even though I've had my license for 3 years as a mortgage rep, I refer clients to the owner of the company instead, but that's something I plan to do when I semi-retire, combine mortgages with the personality training. And who knows, maybe I'll find something else interesting to dive into, but I'm not stopping. I'm not slowing down. I'm going to keep working until I can't work anymore because I love it. I enjoy having a purpose, meeting people, helping people. So there's no reason for to retire from that. I've been married to my wife for 43 years. I love her and I don't plan on retiring from her either. So as long as I love what I'm doing, I'll keep doing it. And if one day I stop loving part of it, I'll drop that part and pick up something new. That's just my philosophy.
So, you often talk about leading with faith and values. What role does your personal moral compass, your sense of God, country, and family play in guiding your decisions?
I think I might have mentioned before it's God, country, family, and then everything else. So having that moral compass is, I think, what keeps me in line, and it keeps me from doing crazy things that don't follow that moral compass. Once somebody asked me, wait, you say God, country, and family. Shouldn't it be God, family, and country? And I said, well, that's a simple answer. And here's a prime example. We just had an example with Charlie Kirk, where, the kid who shot him, the father turned him in. And my guess is that the father probably has God, country, family as his moral compass as well. And so I used to say, if one of my family members became a terrorist, you could bet your sweet Bippy I'm going to turn them in. Because, see, it would be God, country, family. And so country comes before family. And that's just the way I think. People sometimes think I'm crazy. Why would you do that? And, I love my country, serve this country. I love my God and I love my family. But if they go out and rob a bank, unless they're going to cut me in on it, but no, that's my moral compass. It makes it easy for me to make decisions because if it's not right, I can't do it.
It's incredibly powerful, Bill. Thank you for sharing that so openly. Now, how do you think those tough beginnings and that deep faith influence the way you mentor and train others today?
That well, it really comes from a rough, messed up childhood. I had a lot of challenges growing up, and at some point, I had to make a choice. By nature, I'm very driven. I like to work hard, but I also like to have fun. Thing is, my life has to be in order before my fun side can come out and play. Growing up, I had to be an adult much earlier than I should have been, and I've been working since I was 8 years old, even helping to put food on the table at times. It was tough, really tough. But those experiences taught me persistence, discipline, resilience. They made me realize that life isn't a bowl of cherries, and you could either get bitter or you can get better. I chose to get better. I refused to let my circumstances define me. Instead, I decided to build a life that was different, one built on drive, responsibility, and faith. That's where my determination comes from. What I think is the greatest country in the world with the best opportunities if you're willing to take them. I saw a lot of people in New Jersey Transit who just wanted to do the bare minimum and still complain about where they were in life. Meanwhile, immigrants came here, worked 14 to 16 hours a day, built something incredible. And I used to tell my coworkers, look, you're not where they are because you're not willing to do what they do. And above everything else, my foundation is faith. And I was raised Catholic, but I'm a Christian, not the kind that preaches all day, but the kind that quietly trusts God. My faith in Jesus Christ as my Savior keeps me grounded. Honestly, if I mapped out every time God has intervened in my life, you'd be amazed. I wouldn't be where I am today without those moments of grace. So it gets me emotional just thinking about it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that, Bill, and I can understand where that drives come from. You have mentioned a couple of times that you started working when you were just 8 years old. What was that? What was the first job like? What did you do?
Well, I started just running errands for older people who couldn't easily get out. The grocery store was right across the street from where I lived. That quickly became my hangout spot. When I was old enough, I eventually started working there. But before that, by the time I was about 10, I was shoveling snow in the winter, raking leaves in the summer, basically doing whatever small jobs I could find. By the time I was around 12 or 13, I got my first paper route. 6 months later, I took on another one. So I had two paper routes in the morning. Then another 6 months later, I added a third paper route in the afternoon. On top of that, I was still running errands for older folks in the neighborhood. By the time 15, I was working full time in the grocery store. So yeah, I was a bit of a hustler, always looking for ways to make a buck. I liked having a little extra so I could buy nicer things. If I wanted a better pair of sneakers, for example, my mom might give me the $3 for the basic ones, not $3. And they go back 60 or 50 some odd years ago, when $3 could buy you a pair of cheap sneakers. Today, you're not getting anything for $3. But, I would put in the balance to get a nicer pair. Later, when I started dating, I liked being able to take a girl out to dinner and a movie and pay for it myself without asking anyone for money. Yeah, it was a little bit of a rough childhood in some ways, but I made the best of it.
What does success mean to you compared to when you first started, Bill?
When I first started out, especially in real estate, I was focused on the money. My mindset was, let's take care of people, but also let's make money. That was the driving force back then. Now it's different. We're comfortable. We've done okay for ourselves, and our focus has shifted over the years. We've spoiled our nieces and nephew since they were little, and now that they're all young adults, we still spoil them. And now we have a great nephew in the picture. So it's a new baby in the family, and we're ready to spoil the tar out of him too. Karen and I never had any kids of our own, so our nieces and now nephews are, where we spent a lot of our surplus income on.
What gave you that confidence to take that leap when everyone around you thought it was crazy?
It really came down to conviction and faith. I knew deep down that staying where I was wasn't sustainable. I was working 75 to 80 hours a week, never knowing if I had to work the weekend until the day before. And how could I build a relationship, even make an appointment with a client under those conditions? I think I mentioned something about that earlier. So I reached the point where I said, that's it. I can't keep doing this. Karen and I were both working in the same warehouse. She was a manager. I was assistant manager. We were making good money, but we had no freedom, no flexibility, no future beyond, clocking in and clocking out. It actually took me, I guess, 6 or 7 weeks to convince her to quit. When she finally did, we were both out of jobs before we even had our real estate license, and our family thought we had lost it. They told each other, and, don't give them any money. Feed them if you have to, but don't give them cash. What they didn't know was that we had planned this for years. We had saved enough money to go 5, 6, maybe 7 years without a paycheck and still pay our bills, take our vacations, and live comfortably. We're very conservative in how we lived. So we built that cushion intentionally. So when people thought that we were being reckless, we were actually being strategic. We just didn't announce our plans. And honestly, that decision to bet on ourselves was one of the best ones we ever made.
So, Bill, what advice would you give to someone who is thinking about getting into real estate as a second career or balancing it alongside another job?
As a second career, it's immensely tough if you don't have flexibility in your schedule, because you're going to have to show up at home inspections. You're going to have to talk to attorneys. You're going to have to talk to the mortgage rep. Most of this stuff happens during the day. Your client conversations usually happen at night because most of the time they're working, but all the other stuff is during the day. Now, granted, a lot of it is emails and whatnot, so it's gotten a little bit easier, but I still say that it's tough if you don't have the flexibility to attend to that. I go back to the beginning. You need to practice more because you don't have the time. So you need to learn more before, if you're going to do it as a second career, as what I call dual career. I don't like using the word part-time as a real estate agent. You don't want to go to a part-time doctor, and you don't want to go to a part-time attorney. So you definitely don't want to go to a part-time real estate agent. Dual career, shows that you're ambitious. Most of the time I tell people, look, don't talk about how long you've been an agent unless the client brings it up. And if they do, you say you're dual career. It shows you have ambition. You have two careers. You're working your way out of one career. You can add to that story. But that's the way I kind of taught agents to phrase it. If somebody asks you, as a second career or as a dual career, you need to take the first month, 2 or 3, and dive into the craft so that you're comfortable. Again, you have to know what you're doing. That way, when you have a transaction going on, you don't have to reach out to your broker for every question that's time sensitive and could cost you a deal. Right? So that would be my advice for somebody who's looking to do this as dual career. If you're changing careers completely like we did, It's the same concept. You've got to learn, get in, know what you've got to do. But if this is a new career, you have to have the time to get out there and put in the effort to learn. Your learning timeline doesn't have to be 3, 4, 5, 6 months. You can get a strong foundation in the first 30 days if you really dedicate yourself. Now, if you change your career and you get into real estate, like I did with my mortgage license, here's a prime example. I'm not using my mortgage license, because I haven't gotten to learn how to work with a client and how to look up the mortgages and stuff like that. So, but it doesn't cost a whole lot with a mortgage license. Whereas a real estate, you've got boards, MLSs, lockbox, you've got all of these other expenses. So if you're not out there making money, you're going to be drowning real soon. So you have to think about what it is that you're wanting to do. What does your finances look like? You don't want to be chasing the dollar and needing it in order to pay your bills. So if you have a cushion, that's one thing. If you're married or, you have a significant other, you've got children, those have to be family decisions that you make so that everybody's on the same page, because you're going to need support from the family, because you're going to have to be out there running like crazy. That's kind of what we did. And, we spent, 22 years full time in real estate. And the last few have been semi-retired, but I can tell you it's been a great run. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, yes, it does. So, how do you see the future of real estate training evolving over the next 5 to 10 years?
I'd say that 10 years is too far out to predict. Even 5 years these days feels like a stretch, because things are changing so quickly. There's a lot of AI happening right now, and we're all trying to figure out how to use it to enhance our business. It's definitely going to help streamline and automate some of what we do. But at the end of the day, real estate is a people business. I don't know that you're going to be able to take that part out of the equation. It's like telemedicine. It's great if you got a slight cold, but if you get something serious like cancer, or in my case, I had a valve replacement a few years back, that's something you want done in person by the best doctor there is. The same applies here. You can use technology to assist, but you can't replace the human touch. AI is going to be one of the big changes shaping the industry, no doubt. The other major shift I see coming is in the MLS system. We're starting to see them merge and work together more. In New Jersey, for example, we've got, I don't know, maybe 13 different MLSs. I can't even keep track anymore. It would be so much better if we had one unified MLS for the entire state, so that every listing went into the same system. That would make life easier for agents and clients. And I think we're headed in that direction. I just don't know if it'll happen within the next 5 years. So yeah, AI and the merging of MLSs, those two big things I think will change the industry and really help agents in the years ahead.
So, now if tomorrow you had to give your final lesson to the next generation of agents, what would that be?
Anisha, you keep coming up with these great questions. I would keep it simple. Find a trainer that has been successful that you resonate with, and then go full speed. Follow them and go full speed. That would be my final lesson.
Got it. It's similar to the milestone story that you shared, that you should be behind someone who is experienced, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's no sense in trying to reinvent the wheel when you're new. Once you have some experience and success behind you, then you can let your creative juices flow and try different things. When we first opened our office back when the yellow pages was still a thing, that's around
Yeah.
2005, there was a salesperson from Yellow Pages come in to sell us an ad. Since we were a brand new office, they started pitching a small one. While they were showing me the book, I noticed a half-page ad from a competitor and asked, well, what does that one cost? They told me. And then I said, okay, so what if I wanted the whole page? Their eyes nearly
Mm-hmm.
popped out of their head. They definitely weren't expecting that. Karen was in her office. I was in the conference room. And when I heard the price, I said, all right, I'll take the full page. I think at the time it was around 10,000. When I told Karen, she was livid. She said, what do you mean we're spending $10,000? And I told her, don't worry, it's not going to cost us a thing. She looked at me like I was crazy, but I said, no, I'm going to sell space on the ad. So I added a section for an attorney, an accountant, title company, a mortgage lender, and even spots for our agents. So we sold those spaces within the ad, and in the end, it didn't cost us a dime. And here's the
Mm-hmm.
funny part. The following year, two of our competitors went with full page ads too. So I got them to spend more money. The difference was they didn't sell space like we did. They just made their ad bigger. So
Got it.
it was about thinking outside the box. When it came time to go to print the yellow pages, folks tried to say that, "Oh, I couldn't do that." And I said, "Oh, yes, I can." I asked in the contract and they couldn't turn me down. So yeah, that was just one example of thinking creatively and making things work to our advantage. And, again, that's my personality is going out, going crazy. And Karen's was like, "Are you nuts?" Yes.
Okay. So, Bill, now we have to switch gears a little. Let's get into the fun segment part of it. And I have got a few rapid fire questions for you, quick answers only. So, are
Okay.
you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay. So, if your career had a theme song, what would that be?
Eye of the Tiger from Rocky.
What's the best life hack you learned from your 16 years at NJ Transit?
I think I mentioned this earlier, customer service, making customers happy, which was not easy for me to do in the beginning, but that was the carried me through the rest of the things that in my career.
Got it. And are you a coffee or tea kind of a person? And what's your go to order on a busy morning?
Tea and a cheese Danish.
What's one thing your wife, Karen, would say in your most annoying real estate habit?
Oh, God, when we first got started, it would be the cell phone. She would say to people, "Yeah, I sleep on one side and the cell phone sleeps on the other side. And if the cell phone makes noise, it trumped her." So the cell phone would be the most annoying because I looked at it, hey, that's money. The phone rings, you got to answer it. It's money. That's all. But I've gotten better. It took me the better part of 20 years for me to get better.
20 years is a long time, Bill. And we have to check this from your wife, Karen herself.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, it's gotten much better since I've kind of gone semi-retired on real estate. So I don't go where I have to answer the phone. I can let it go to voicemail and I'll return a call. But yeah, it was tough for the first 7 or 8 years in real estate. Like I said, she used to joke all the time.
Okay, so if you could only show one type of property for the rest of your career, what would that be? A penthouse, a condo, or a charming single family home?
Single family home all the time. Because being in association management gave me an opportunity to see the challenges and the risks involved in townhouse condo ownership and dealing with boards and budgets. And I have a feeling that over the next few years, because of the laws that have just recently changed, that things are going to get better, not worse. But it's still, I'd rather sell that single family home. That's where I'd rather be.
Got it. And what's one piece of advice you would give to your younger self on your very first day as an agent?
I would say trust but verify. As I mentioned, some of this answer earlier, as a new agent, you're going to get sold every widget and every this, and you're going to get bombarded. So you have to trust what they're saying. But before you go and sign the dotted line, verify. Verify with people who are doing or have spent the money doing that, but trust and verify.
The biggest splurge you have ever made in real estate?
Oh, I would say that the one of the first things we did, and I think this was like in the year 2000, we got our own personal website, and back then that was a big thing. Most offices didn't even have a website, and that was a costly undertaking back then. So, and the other thing when we got into exit would be the conventions. Going to the convention
Okay.
every year and the New Jersey convention, and those are I don't look at them as actually a splurge. I look at it as an investment because you're going to make connections at the conventions. You're going to learn a boatload of stuff. And I tell people, you're going to come back with pages and pages of notes. Pick 2 or 3 things that you wrote down and focus on implementing 1 or 2 of them to start off with, and then add the third or fourth. But don't come back and try and do all of them because you're not going to be able to. So pick the 1 or 2, implement them, and it's a gradual increase that begins to create exponential growth and exponential return.
Bill, if you were a Jersey City neighborhood, which one would you be and why?
Jersey City neighborhood, old stomping grounds. I might have said a number of years ago that, nah, you know what? I would still say that I'm downtown. And the reason I say it because it's continually growing and it's reinventing itself. So I'm like downtown Jersey City, continually growing and reinventing myself.
And what is the motto you live by that has nothing to do with real estate? It's just your personal motto.
Look, every day is a great day. If you don't think so, try missing one because every day above ground is a great day. It doesn't always mean that life is going to be rosy. We all have our problems and challenges. And I once heard something powerful at a seminar. The speaker asked, who here has a problem they don't want to deal with? And of course, everyone's hand goes up. And they said, okay, what we're going to do is everybody's going to write their problem down and they're going to bring it up here and put it in this hat. And once everybody had done that, he said, now come back up and pull out someone else's problem. But whatever your problem you pull out, you're stuck with. And suddenly no one wanted to raise their hand. No one wanted to put their problem in the hat because they all realized, sure, we have our own problems, but we have no idea what someone else might be dealing with. And chances are we'd rather keep our problems. So that kind of stuck with me. It's not the problem that's the problem. It's how we deal with it. Life is short and every day is a blessing. So I tell people, I work like I'm going to live to 150, but I'm also ready to go tonight if the Lord decides to take me home. And that's just my philosophy and I live by it. Everyone who knows me knows that I'm very open about it. I used to tell people I was shooting for 100, but more and more people making it to 100. So I bumped it to 125. Now there's people, hitting 116 and 117. So I bumped it to 150. Who knows? By the time I get to 100, I might be saying 175 or 200. I don't know. But, it's that I don't want to program into my mind anything less. I watched my father-in-law who started to wish he was gone in his 70s and used to joke and say, Dad, look, take your sock off. And he said, what for? I said, I just want to see if there's an expiration date on the bottom of your foot. My stepmother-in-law just recently passed and she was 84 and she was starting to get that feeling of, I don't want to be here anymore. Life is just too precious. You cannot let your mind start to think that way because your mind will tell your body, okay, we're done. And your body will shut down, check out. No, so again, it's about positive attitude, moving forward, constantly having something to do, someone to love and somewhere to go. You keep active, you keep your mind active. I do Sudokus when I'm messing around because it challenges the mind, but I challenge my mind all the time anyway. So it's just who I am and it's what I do and it's what I believe in.
Got it. So, Bill, thank you so much for doing this with us. It was an incredible episode that we have just recorded. And thank you so much for your time and sharing your incredible journey. Your passion for the business and your dedication to the next generation of agents is truly inspiring. Bill's journey is the proof that success comes from persistence, integrity, and a love for what you do. Bill, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Thank you.
You.